Sometimes people will come to the shop and they'll play something and really like it, but then say something to the effect of, oh, well, it sounds really good here, but what about when I take it home? Which I think is funny because it's almost like we're pulling some sort of acoustic trickery on them and making all of our drums magically sound good in the store, but sound like crap when they get home. But I know what they're saying. The idea is that, oh, maybe our room sounds really good, but it might not sound as good when they get home, which brings me to this question that I've thought about a lot, which is, how can you tell objectively what a drum sounds like if it is always contextualized within a room? So what I mean by this is basically the idea that a drum is going to sound different in every room. Obviously, we've all experienced this where we tune a snare a certain way in our practice room and then we take it on a gig and it sounds completely different. And I think this effect is best exemplified in a video, I believe called just Drums in a Room, which I'll link down below. It's a great video of engineers taking the same drummer, drum set, tuning, same microphones, and basically taking the exact same setup and putting them in a variety of different rooms in different studios around the world, and then playing them back to back to show you what they sound like in each room. And if you've never heard this effect, you will understand what I'm talking about immediately after watching this video. The exact same drums played the exact same way sound remarkably different depending on what room they're in. And it's not even just the room that the drums are in that makes a difference in the sound. It also makes a huge difference where you are standing in comparison to the drums. I'm sure we've all had the experience where the drums have sounded great from behind them, but then someone else plays your kit and you stand out front and you realize, oh, that sounds totally different than how I thought. Or maybe someone holds up a snare and plays it and you're hearing from the bottom side and it sounds way too buzzy and snary, but then you go around to the other side and it sounds great on top of the drum. So again, all of these conflating factors where you start to think, well, wait, what actually is the sound of the drum if I can just move my head a few feet and it sounds completely different? And it's not even that. It's not even just the room that the drum is in. It could be what room you are in comparison to what room the drums are in. So for example, let's try an experiment. This room that my drums are in right now, despite how it looks on the wide angle lens, is actually quite small for a drum set. So it sounds very tight and dead. However, the room just outside is very large and reverberant. So let's try this. I'm going to keep the drums in the same room and then I'm going to put a microphone up and we'll see what it sounds like to listen to the drums from inside the room right on top of the kit, and then from just outside this room. The drums won't move, but we'll just move the microphone just outside the room and see what a difference that makes. So obviously that makes a huge difference too. Not only is it where the drums are, but it's where you are listening from. And I can move my ears or a microphone 10 feet and the drums will sound completely different. So this started to prey on my mind the more and more I thought about it. I was thinking, okay, well then how do I determine what a drum really sounds like if the sound is always mitigated by whatever room you're in and it can sound good here and bad here? And we haven't even talked about all the other factors like tuning, hardware, heads, all of the other things that we know make big differences in the sound of a drum. So how can we isolate any individual component or even isolate the drum as it is and determine what does it actually sound like in objective reality? Because we can't judge it in a vacuum. So I guess we could take two of the same drums and put them in the same room and set them up the same way with the same heads and the same wires and the same microphones and say, okay, you know, at least we can evaluate these two drums against each other. We'll hold all these factors constant. The only variable will be the drum shell and then try and make an evaluation that way. But even if that's the case, what if one snare sounds better with a coated ambassador and another one sounds better with a coated emperor? What if one does better with Canopus wires and another one does better with pure sound wires? So I think it's difficult or maybe even impossible to make a true apples to apples comparison of any two drums against each other, just because the variety of contexts that you could have your drum in is infinite. And I think it's even more difficult to make a proper, or at least an objective, opinion about any drum in any given situation, because that drum, again, could be in any other given situation. So this may seem like an incredibly OCD way of thinking about drums, but I just think it's an interesting thought experiment that there is no actual distilled sound of a drum. There's only the drum plus the way it's set up, plus the room, plus where you are listening to it from. So there are all of these mitigating and conflating factors that go between the actual sound of the drum and what you hear. So anytime I hear anyone say, oh, those are the best drums I've ever heard, I think to myself, well, maybe it's the best drum room you've ever heard, or maybe that's the best combination between drum room, microphones, mix, etc. There are all these other factors that are going into what makes the drum sound, which is why I think it's a little more accurate to say, oh, that's the best drum sound I've ever heard, because I think that encapsulates all these extra factors that some people attribute more so to the drum itself versus all of the other factors that go into the drum sound as a whole. So here's the message in case I lost anybody there. You are never actually hearing just the drum. You are always hearing a combination of how it's tuned, how it's set up, more importantly, the room that it's in, where you are listening to it from, and a myriad of other factors too. So just be wary whenever you're listening and trying to evaluate a drum sound that it is a drum sound, not necessarily just the drum itself. So let me know what you think about this. I've been thinking about it for a while, and it's just kind of an interesting idea in my mind. But if you've had any similar experiences like this, let me know. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.